Okay, Richard, question number one. Was there a moment, can you take us back when you first discovered music? Was it a player? Was it someone that you knew in the neighborhood, an artist, an instrument? Can you tell us?
Sure. So I don't know if there was one particular moment because I grew up in a home which was filled with music. My parents weren't professional musicians, but they were naturally gifted musicians. And my dad sang. He had kind of a Frank Sinatra sound,
Oh,
and he could sing all the Spanish songs for Mexican parties and anything in German and in English. So he had all the standards. My mom loved opera and Perry Como and Barbra Streisand. So we had that, and then I had three older siblings, all of whom had different musical tastes. They all loved classical, but they all had different tastes. From heavy metal on my brother's side to Beatles with my sister and James Brown with my oldest sister.
good on them.
So so I loved being immersed in music. I think when I began writing, playing the piano when I was about 5. That's when I started lessons, and I remember writing my first piece to a picture book. I hear music very. I see music. It's like a very cinematic relationship with music. I see things, and I so much enjoyed that, and uh, and so whenever I would see TV or a movie, I remember one time I was 9 or 10 years old, and I asked my dad. He's watching the Ed Sullivan Show. I said, "What's that, Dad?" He goes, "Those are violins," and I was fascinated by that. Or movies that featured a solo violin, and I just said, "I want to play that instrument. I want to express myself like that."
You got interested in the violin around 9 or 10, which is
Yeah.
shocking to me. And this leads us into question two. I figured you started playing violin at 11 months, would be my guess. I'm serious, based on the way you play. But so you discovered it around 9 or 10.
Yes.
When did you start taking lessons?
Well, I started. Well, I enjoyed the violin demonstration at my elementary school. So I guess that was fifth grade, maybe. So in fifth and sixth grade, I think you're about 10,
Hmm.
maybe 10, 10 and
Yeah.
a half. That's when I took a class, orchestral class. So we had group violin lessons, not a Suzuki thing, but just a fine player that came in and he taught the people who were interested in strings. And then a year later, when I was about 10 and a half or 11, I started taking individual lessons because one thing about how I like to roll is if I love something, whether it be science or languages or astronomy or whatever, or music, I want to dive into it and be the best I possibly can.
Amen.
And so I just wanted to be the best player ever. I didn't know if I wanted to be a musician yet, but so I got into it and I took it very seriously. And I continued with violin lessons throughout graduate school.
So let me ask you, if you started when you were around 10, and this was from question two, even though I'm glad you elaborated, when did you make the decision? Can you remember actually making a decision like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life?
Hmm.
Was there a moment?
Yes, there were a couple moments,
Oh, I love it.
and there are moments that I had an answer that kind of blocked off my path to violin. Because the first answer, well, I had a great teacher in Hollywood, a studio guy and a soloist, and he was teaching me in Hollywood. I was like 14 or 15, and he stopped me while I was playing in front of him, and he said, "Richard, just tell me, what do you want to do with the violin? You're
Oh,
a talented person, and do you want to play the violin? What do you want to do? Are you going to be a concert violinist?" And I told Mr. Shub, I said, you know, I just want to be the best violinist I can. I said that to him. And then another time, I was a double major, geology and music major in undergrad school. And my advisor, Lynn Tennyson, I had a crush on her. She was like a babe and great geologist. And she
aren't they
was
all?
my advisor, and she was a geologist. And, and she was saying, you know what? You need to focus your attention on either science or when you go to grad school, you have to think this way. You have to go this way. So she made me realize that I had to start making a plan. I decided I think I want to give music a try professionally. And the reason why I was a little reticent and hesitant about diving in as a professional, I knew my own limitations. I knew that I had obstacles in front of me that I didn't know how to get in front of, and that my current teaching, people have to move around from teacher to teacher to get different aspects of
Sure.
technique and music. And I was stuck. I couldn't get better. I could I could get to the point where I was beating something in a submission and make it sound pretty good for most people. But I knew that wasn't good enough for being an orchestral player. I wanted to be in a chamber ensemble. So I decided I needed to go focus on who do I want to study with? Who's the greatest guru, classical trained violinist, soloist that I respect? Who loves Johann Sebastian Bach the most that I do and is an expert? And who can take me there? That's when I really focused on becoming a marketable player.
Do you have a first, I don't want to say proud, a first angelic moment where you just couldn't realize you're getting paid, you're playing, and it's really happening? Was there a moment that it kind of hit you?
There were noteworthy experiences, and I did have some concerts I did have epiphanies. They were so rare, and that's one reason I left the big symphony orchestras. And I did have, most of the time when I had great experiences, it was in chamber music,
Mm.
because you're very responsible for your part, yet you have to be part of I don't want to sound corny, but it's like an organism. And it's an organism that has developed beyond rehearsals.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's an organism in the crucible of performance that it's doing new things. It's keeping you on your toes. It's like just inviting you, and you're inviting others to do something different. And so I remember playing a Brahms quintet where we just couldn't believe what was coming out of the music. And even when I broke my E string in the last movement,
What are you, a guitar player?
I kept playing on the A string because it was too close to the end. I didn't want to stop. I even gave my E string a bow, but we were really in that groove. You know that term. We were in that moment, and I think that was probably one of the greatest times.
I'm so glad it was Brahms. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, it was.
Now that we've pumped you up and we have all these good sugary feelings, now we got to go to the hell gig. And I gotta be,
Uh-oh.
I am fascinated by this because a lot of people think of rock bands or jazz bands or smoky rooms at 2 a.m. or a guy's with a drug problem or he's cheating on his wife. And not that that doesn't happen in the classical realm, and not that you haven't played other genres, but I'm so curious. You got to give me a specific hell gig, Richard, please.
There was an instance with a major pop singer who
Uh-oh.
was coming out of from not having performed for a long time, and this pop singer held back paying us for 6 months, and we're talking about major star.
Right, right.
And that was very distressing to me, because why would someone do that to a fellow musician?
What does the future hold for music? However that hits you, technologically, culturally, anyway.
I hit a little bit on the idea of constant 24/7 free streaming that is happening right now of all of our music, which is not a good model if you're trying to encourage people to hone their craft, get great, become musicians, and make a living. A DVD or a CD is a fossil
Yeah.
record of a particular, in this case, a sculpted performance, okay, of perfection. So the challenges have been for live musicians. They need to be great recording artists, totally different talent from performing artists.
Absolutely.
And as performing artists, it has made them become better players because they've had to be better. They're expected to sound like, to a degree, the recordings. But when I played live music in orchestral, like Harry Potter movies, against the screen, with a live audience, the audience inevitably says, blows the soundtrack way out of the water. The emotion, the expressivity, the mistakes, the
Right.
human.
Yes.
I
Yes.
call it the glory of messiness.
Yeah.
That coefficient of and everyone's coming from a slightly different angle from their human experience,
Right.
and they're playing, and people respond to that. It was the same with playing. I also did the Hollywood Bowl. I was principal second for Danny Elfman, and I had a lot of solos, and we did Tim Burton
Oh,
movie.
wow.
Well, there were 19-year-olds that came up to us, dressed as Eric Scissorhands or something. They say, we had no idea of the power of an orchestra. When's the fill playing? When's the other? So that's telling me that there's something about live performance that we need to keep going.
Richard, at 22, you say you're heading out to do your thing again. With what you know now, just with your relationship with music, what would you tell that young 22-year-old Richard Altenbach?
I really appreciate this opportunity because I think I have a lot of experience and insight in it,
Mm-hmm.
having been 28 years in the Hollywood industry and doing records as well as movies and playing, in orchestras and all that. If someone comes to me, a young person, I get really excited because maybe they're a composition student or a notation student, and how do I get into movies? How do I get into LA? How do I do this?
Right, right.
Don't get married yet. Don't be married. Be married to music, and you're thrilled about working for these people. So think about who your favorite composer is. Is it Hans Zimmer? Do you want to be in those 2 square blocks in Santa Monica, remote control studios, working with one of the nicest, most hilarious, fun, and helpful geniuses in film composition today? Would you
Absolutely.
like to hook on to one of those, become a water boy, become an errand boy for that person? Badger them at a jingle house, say, hey, I can do notation. I'm really good with Sibelius or a finale program. I'd be happy to do copying. I did copying by hand when I was a young person in Hollywood, Judy Green music for the, movie cues. And do that. Get in the midst of someone, because before you know it, those composers, successful composers, they start getting gigs like maybe TV shows or maybe a film, and it requires orchestration. Orchestrators helping them out. Hey, do you want to write a cue? Do you want to ghost write a cue? That that's kind of a bandage between this big whatever combat scene and then here's the love scene. I need a bandage of 11 seconds, and you have the sound you've written. So I would say hook up with and be fine with being paid or unpaid as an intern.
Yeah.
It's better to have some kind of pay. I think that's respectful for a good composer to pay a part-time gig, but do everything with them, learn them, enjoy that. Same with if you can get in beyond the gatekeepers in Santa Monica, or, with Activision or one of those game companies, get in there, start doing that, and feel it from the inside, and hone your craft in the meantime, your composition and style. You need to have all the chops, so you need to know the traditional, if you're getting, let's say, orchestral music.
Right.
Learn Tchaikovsky. It's not Rimsky-Korsakov anymore, orchestration, it's Tchaikovsky, that's all. It's still Tchaikovsky. It's been that way since 1930. Learn Tchaikovsky orchestration methods. Learn what you're best at. What's your quirk? What's your little twist you have? Make it bloom.
All right, this is I'm really excited about this one. I'm going to ask you the obvious. I'm going to ask you your 3 favorite composers, classical composers. But then the other three I'm going to ask you are desert, and it can't be classical. Desert island albums. What are the 3 albums that are not classical that you're taking with your family
Oh my gosh.
to Barbados?
With my family.
Well, no, they don't have to come. It could just
Okay, because that will add a different choice, a different grab bag.
yeah, they're wonderful people, but let's forget about them.
Get the family, they'll have their own earbuds and listening to their own things.
Right, so we got three favorite classical composers, 3 desert island albums that are not classical.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go.
So, without a doubt and without hesitation, the greatest composer, in my opinion, is Johann Sebastian Bach.
There it is.
So, because you have the intellect, the architect, the expressive genius that tears your heart out at the same time, and plus the sheer amount of composition and variety. So that's the first one.
Bach number 1.
Bach number 1. There's no going back. So thank you for asking about the other one. So I would say Igor Stravinsky. The whole motivic, truncated little parts of motifs and quirky little, half rhythms and, and the way that he put his puzzle together.
Yeah.
I just love his music, and the power of that music is mostly percussion driven, but that music of Stravinsky, the wild the better, and he had a very sardonic, sarcastic sense of humor, and he used to say he moved to Hollywood, and I remember one of the sayings he said was, the best way to never be asked to score a film in Hollywood is to move to Hollywood. Because after Fantasia, he never worked again. But
Oh
so
my
so
gosh.
Igor Stravinsky, just because of that genius and what he did to propel us into a whole new world of,
He would have been a great bebop or hard rock player, guitar
oh
player.
yeah, and he would have become just like Picasso. He would have either started a musical school based on that for a while, become the best, and then go on.
Do something else. Yeah.
So I love Stravinsky.
All right,
That's another one.
number three.
Wow. So I was going to go somewhere with, because I happen to love medieval and Renaissance music the best.
Oh wow.
So I was going to go with someone like Orlando Gibbons or William Byrd. But I think, to be honest with myself, the respect that I've gained for Ludwig van Beethoven, because you have here this spirit, troubled spirit in a way, but he could write joyous and beautiful things. Joy, the anthem in the Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy,
Oh,
but the passion and pathos, and he came from a classical time period. It's considered late classicism, maybe not romantic classicism, but mid to late classicism, with Mozart being that first early classic to, Mozart has said in his own words that music can never be grating, never ugly, never, it could be horrifying, but never unpleasant to the ear. Never, it always has to flatter, the audience. Mozart's audience were kings and queens and emperors, okay?
wow.
And powdered wigs. That's why when Beethoven came along, he said, forget that. Music is meant to, as he said, to forge a fire in the breast of man and to wrench tears from the eyes of women. Music was meant to be personal. That's why he's the ultra romantic. He was individualistic. He said it has to, and another saying he said, which I love, and I tell my students in orchestras and things, that as a conductor sometimes in youth orchestras, I'd say, he said, to miss a note is inconsequential. To play without passion is unforgivable.
Oh, I love.
So, so, and also the last thing he said on his deathbed just endears me to him, brings tears to my eyes.
Oh,
He says, I'm dying, he said, I will hear again in heaven.
oh.
A deaf man. Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
So I so just that kind of it just made me respect so much the just what he did and what he expressed
Richard,
from that human form.
I love what you're saying because Beethoven, when he writes, it sounds like he's wrenching his clothes and he's crying and bleeding all at the same time. And I've read some stuff about he was absolutely touched by God. And I've read some of his words going back and forth with the divine. And why would you
Yes.
give me this gift? And why would you take away my hearing? I mean, it wrecks you. But if that's what it took to
Yeah.
get this beautiful music, I think Beethoven would do it all over again.
And that's part of what it took. I only bought like three soundtracks in my life, movie soundtracks, and one of them was Ennio Morricone, The Mission.
Oh,
So maybe The Mission. Another soundtrack I bought was a game. I've only bought three game soundtracks. One was Halo. Anthologies derived from Renaissance virginal music, harpsichord music, the music of the Renaissance of the Elizabethan times. Okay,
food, sports, or travel.
go with the travel.
Okay, love it.
I love travel.
I'm going to say that you have an unlimited budget. You can call any player that you want, and you can go to any three cities. I don't want to say the venue because I don't want the venue to be the thing. I want the city to be the thing. But you
Okay.
can go to any three cities or towns in the world playing whatever you want, no budget, best players. Where are those three places?
One thing I'd like to do is get together with members of either the London Symphony or Philharmonic or St. Martin in the Fields, the chamber ensemble, and do chamber music concert and travel all around the Cotswold region, these little villages. How about a duo and sometimes a trio with my wife singing, a piano, violin, and sometimes my wife doing a show on a cruise ship, the in to Tahiti, the Paul Gauguin cruise ship to Tahiti. It's a very extravagant, beautiful cruise
Wow.
ship. It's a 10-day cruise or something, and you're playing chamber music, Broadway tunes, our own music, just a variety. Have Bren, he can play trumpet or piano or sing.
Yeah, listen, there's no way I'm going to make that because I don't do cruises because of sharks. So we're going to have to.
No, you don't have to
I'm-
swim. So
if,
that's one.
well, this is what I know. If we start singing, if we start sinking, you're going to be the one in the corner playing. Well, anyway, um,
Well, that's funny you say that because I worked on that movie Titanic.
oh my god.
And in the movie, there's a scene that they have a string quartet, actually a quintet, actually with the bass, and they're on the deck playing "Nearer to God Than Thee" or something, whatever. It's an actual song. They know what they played as they're going down in the ship. Well, I was one of the players in that, also in the small group. You
Oh,
know, I wasn't on the film. I wasn't in the. I wasn't one of the people on in the screen,
you
but
played though. You.
I was playing, and we're going, glug glug glug, going down with the ship.
Oh, what a great story. All right, number 3, last place.
I'd like to go to my homeland, yeah, meine Heimat, which is Austria, Österreich, and Germany. So I would be in the anechoic. Well, no, I want to be in maybe the opera house, and I would be conducting my music to a film score, and it would be being scored by the Vienna Philharmonic
Yes, it will.
right there in front of me.
Ah,
And that's what I would love to be, and then just spend a month, you know, walking around in the inner city and in all the Heiligenstadt and all the little hiking areas around the forest there.
Number 9. Number 9.
what are you doing right now? Did you do something recently? Is there something in 2022 we can talk about?
So the most recent projects I had, which was actually last year. It was a short film called "Paint Me in the Opera House," and it was a very eerie kind of Hitchcockian, but a ghost story. Then another thing I have recently done, and I'm working on now, 2 Psalms of David for SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, choir, and piano. And as far as what I'm doing, what I want to do next, I have 2 main projects on my docket. 3 main projects. One is a mass, a Latin mass, but one told through my own experiences, kind of more turbulent things going on and expressive things, and yet it's Latin, and it's going to be orchestral with choir. So
Oh man, I can't wait.
I want it to be big. I
Oh,
mean, I want it to be a big thing for me to do it. But I love medieval history. You probably got that idea. I have an idea for uh, it's like at the time of the Norman conquest, and it's the Anglo-Saxon times, all this turmoil right before. It's like a musical.
oh wow.
So doing a musical with this kind of Celtic medieval sound, and yet you have to imagine the Broadway. Dawn's helping me with all this stuff too, and I need the storyline. It has Godiva in it and Elfrich and like real characters, and just how this ties together. I might call it Godiva or Elfrich or something, and that's another thing I want to work on. I think it'd be really important. As far as instrumental, I'm working on a solo violin piece for violin alone, and
Mm.
I'm very much, maybe I'm 60, 70% through. It's called Fantasy on 3 Ancient Carols.
We'll have links to all your stuff, which is vast. I haven't seen you in a while, and we've got a chance to play a little bit, and I'm so excited to hear your music. 'Cause just listen to the 1,000 movies that you've been on. You know, as a violinist, you're the best of the best. You are an absolute gentleman. I cannot thank you enough for coming. I look forward to hearing your compositions as well, and you're phenomenal at that. Richard, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Kyle. It was a
Am I,
real
allowed, am I
pleasure.
allowed to say man to a classical virtuoso?
Of course.
Is that allowed?
Hey, classical people, first of all, they were the first ones called long hairs.
Ah! Oh,
Secondly, they call a violin a fiddle.
ah!
And thirdly, all they really want to do is talk sports and have good fancy restaurants to eat at.
Well, send them my way. I love food.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the classical world.
thank you so much, man. We're going to keep in touch.
You bet. It was a real pleasure to see. I hope I see you in the future soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. Can you dig deep down and get it now? Will you find a way? You're looking for the lining, but it doesn't seem to come today. Here's what I've been discovering, 'cause nothing got the cure but that word. My eyes are wide as life defies. Better times seem left behind. Days are here, you and I come near, yeah, to say I'm grateful now. Love is made, so love is found. So grateful now. Unless we know that we will be with you. Everyday people will be the answer. A smile today, 'cause that will be enough to pick up our brothers and sisters always. Yeah. Hey, hey, hey. Is what I've been discovering, 'cause nothing got that cure but the word. Yeah. Oh, my eyes are wide as life defines. Better times seem left behind. Days are here, you and I come together, say I'm grateful now. Love is made, so love is found. You're grateful now. One day soon you'll know that we will be with you. You're grateful now. Love is made, love is found. You're grateful now. One day soon you'll know that we will be with you. Eyes are wide, life defies. Better times seem left behind. Days are here, you and I come together, say you will try. Try, yeah. Come grateful now. Love is made, so love is found. Come grateful now. One day soon you'll know that we will be with you. Come grateful now. Love is made, love is found. Come grateful now. One day soon you'll know that we will be with you. Go grateful now. One day soon you know we will just be true.
Good.